Hey, this is Troy from Planet 76. We've got some really good Sixers-focused content coming your way today. Make sure you subscribe to the pod so you can be in the know when we release new content. Enjoy the show.
Welcome, everybody, to Planet 76 podcast. My name is Michael Troy as well. As usual, we have a very, very special, very, very special guest. I can't overstate how special the guest is because extremely special guest, Marc Zumoff. Absolute pleasure to have you on. Welcome and thank you again for your time.
Thanks, guys. Too many verys in that sentence, too many extremely's. I'm just an old, broken down, retired broadcaster who's glad to be on with you guys.
Yeah, we appreciate it a lot. We really do.
Got it.
Yeah, Mark.
And,
So,
yeah, go ahead and
what's the transition been like? I mean, Sixers play-by-play announcer for 27 years, and in that realm for even many more years before that. And so, kind of after June of 2021, hitting the retirement, and what has life been like since then for you?
For me, it wasn't a sudden thing. I had 3 years to think about it because I had a 3-year contract. And after the first of the 3 years, my wife and I decided that we're going to use the 2-year runway to transition. So I had plenty of time to think about it and plan. And I work at my alma mater, Temple University. I'm a teacher. I teach a social media course. I teach a play-by-play course. I'm the associate director of a program called the Claire Smith Center for Sports Media. We've started a sports media major. We're building a brand new communication school. So there's a lot happening, and it's a very exciting place to be. I am also the chairman of a program called Maccabi Media, and the Maccabi Games traditionally for about the last century have been known as the Jewish Olympics. So for young aspiring sports media professionals, we go to Israel or we go to Latin America or we go to Europe and we cover whatever version of the games is taking place as you would the Olympics. So we stream live events and do
Right.
reporting and that sort of thing. So those two things keep me busy, that and a 2-year-old grandchild. And I'm loving life. I'm really fortunate to have done what I did. And now I'm glad that I'm not doing it anymore.
No, that's awesome. We appreciate that. Still keeping busy. That's great. Still, even have your feet in on the media world and training other people to come up and do what you've been able to do for so long and have such a successful career with the Sixers. I mean, I can tell you just from my mini, I started following the Sixers, when I was young. Allen Iverson, he was the guy. I don't have any Philadelphia connection, but he was the reason I became a Sixers fan. And to hear, your voice on the broadcast for so many years is so cool. And, like Michael said earlier, I mean, this is such a cool thing to be able to chat with you now. So thank you for sharing that. And really cool again to hear what you're still doing, in the world of media and sports broadcasting.
It's funny you would say all those things because even though I did do it for 27 years, the whole thing seems rather surreal. Only
Mhm.
because I was just a kid growing up in Northeast Philly, fantasizing that one day I would do what it is that I did. And the odds of that happening are extremely high. And so the fact that I did do it and had the opportunity to work with some great people, to be around during the Iverson era, I don't know what I did to deserve it, but I feel very good about my fortune. I'm very grateful every day.
Awesome.
Absolutely. And I don't know if Troy meant to do this, but he just gave us a perfect segue into our next question. And again, I feel like it's only fair and right that I would ask you, any advice that you would have for anyone looking to take up the profession, whether it be broadcasting, play-by-play announcing, or even something in the realm of a sports radio personality, any sort of advice that you could give, especially for somebody who maybe is just coming out of college or even before they're graduating, anything at all in that realm for you.
That's a really loaded question, or maybe I should say it's a loaded answer.
Hmm.
I give lectures on career development, and those lectures sometimes go 45 minutes to an hour, which I know we don't have. So some of the basics would include, well, the first thing is to believe in yourself.
Hmm.
that you need to have that inherent belief that you can do what it is that you set out to do. You may have heard the expression that be careful what you wish for. So you have to know that if you have the fortune to arrive at that particular point, that you are meant to do this particular career objective, and it doesn't necessarily have to mean sports media. It can mean almost anything.
Hmm. Hmm.
Networking, which of course people have heard ad nauseum since. Um, I think it's even in the digital age and where connections are forged through LinkedIn and social media and what have you, the in-person direct ties to people really does help a lot, especially when it comes to hiring and finding out where the opportunities are before they hit the general job market. Skill acquisition, as many skills as you could possibly acquire, which makes you more employable. It
Hmm.
allows you to break into the business, even if your golden opportunity is still 5 to 10 years down the road. You have an opportunity to get inside a sports team or inside of a website or some sports media entity, and at least begin to earn money that way. So those are like the three main things.
Hmm.
And then there's a lot of dotting I's and crossing T's, which I won't bore you with, having to do with networking and skill acquisition and developing those skills.
Yep.
But those are the three basic underpinnings, I think, to giving yourself a chance to be a success.
Yeah, I love how you mentioned the in-person aspect because even though we're so digital, obviously nowadays, I feel like there's something that you can't really replicate especially when it comes to networking. Um, the in-person element, the shaking people's hands, introducing yourself to people, going up to people, getting your face in front of other people. I feel like even though you can do a lot of that on LinkedIn, like you said, there's just something that's a little bit unmatched about the in-person element to that. And it's something that I don't know. I mean, I know we're going really digital nowadays, but I don't know that you are ever really going to be able to replicate that or replace that.
And even what we're doing now, I mean, we're doing this over Zoom and we
Yeah.
do have a nice rapport and the conversation is good, but there's so much to be said about body language and direct human to human contact
Yep.
that changes the whole vibe. Not to knock your podcast or for that matter mine, where almost all the interviews are done remotely,
Hmm.
but it's just my understanding because I teach a social media course and part of that is podcasting, that in-person podcasts, in other words, where you are there with your guest in a studio or some other setting,
Yep.
tend to do well
Yep.
or do better than the ones via Zoom
Yep.
because of everything we just talked about.
Yeah, and the dynamic is just it's a lot different. And I think when you're in person, you can get that like real, like you mentioned, that real rapport, that real back and forth with the person. It's funny, Troy and I have actually discussed, hopefully maybe one day we can do an in-person podcast. Just because we're 166 episodes in and we would love to give that a try. So at some point. So
Funny you would say that because I'm pretty sure the only one that I've done with my podcast, and I've been doing it for almost 2 years, was,
mhm.
believe it or not, Iverson
Oh,
when
wow.
they dedicated his sculpture in the sculpture gardens at
Yeah.
the Sixers training complex. So they had me in, they dusted me off, and I hosted the ceremony. And the Sixers were kind enough to arrange an in-person interview with, I think, NBC Sports Philly and one other entity and me. So it almost had to be done live. And
Mhm.
the whole vibe sitting in an office, and he had some folks around, and I had my producer and a couple of other people around, makes a world of difference for sure.
Awesome. That's awesome. That really is fantastic.
All
Yeah,
right. So
thanks.
speaking of Allen Iverson, or speaking of anything in your career, obviously we know you from the Sixers, the voice of the Sixers for many years, and I mean, you want to talk about a question that you could probably spend hours on. We don't have that much time, but what would you say, your favorite memory, favorite team, favorite interaction, favorite game, favorite call, favorite anything, or just some of those memories from a 27-year career with the Sixers that kind of stick out to you? And again, speaking to that kind of surreal feeling that you had for 27 years as a whole, but maybe some of those surreal moments that stick out.
this might sound like I'm copping out and not answering your question, but as I had said
It's a tough
earlier, Troy,
question.
well, no, listen, the whole thing was surreal. I
Yeah.
Yeah.
mean, just,
Yeah.
because I was not one of those kids who in high school you would say, "Oh, he's going places," or "This guy's dynamic," or "He's good looking," or "He's really smart." I was none of those. I'm still none of those. But so I tell people all the time, yes, I could point to certain game-winning shots or calls, or of course, I remember vividly what it was like at what was it then, First Union Center to clinch Game 7 against Milwaukee and go to the finals, or the Vince Carter shot in Game 7
Mm.
against Toronto, or
Mhm.
finally beating Indiana in the first round of the playoffs. Yeah, I mean, in general, the 2001 season was just tremendous, and it was a whole different era of basketball. I mean, games were in the 90s. It was blue collar. It was
Yep.
tough. That's you. I don't believe in today's environment, especially then with the lack of three-point shooting, that you could take a team like they built around Iverson
Mhm.
and compete in today's NBA. I just don't think it can be done.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, I'm going off on a tangent. It was I could break it down into stories. I go to groups all the time, and I'll tell different stories, and people will get a laugh, or they'll be wide eyed, or how is it that can happen? But for overall, Troy, the entire experience was just um, well, again, I know I'm repeating myself, but I just can't believe I had the opportunity to live the life that I lived, and I'm very, very grateful for it.
It's awesome.
That's so awesome. That's so
Yeah,
cool.
2001's got to be it. I was young, but that's when I first started following the Sixers a little bit. And like I said, Allen Iverson he's the whole reason I started following that team. I have no Philadelphia connection whatsoever. Grew up at that time. I was on the other side of the state near Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh didn't have an NBA team, and so I was like, you know what, that guy with the cornrows, rocking the number three, doing things a little different from the way the rest of the world did. I'm gonna root for him. So that's it, and made it through the process era, and
Mm.
hoping the Sixers can make some noise this year too. But yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. That's cool. Some cool insight
You're
there.
welcome.
So we'll get a little more Sixers centric here. And I guess at the end of the day, this question is kind of similar to to the last question Troy just asked. But if you had to pick your favorite Sixers team ever, which can be an era, it can be a specific team, it can be a specific year, or just any specific iteration of the Sixers that you like. If you could choose one Sixers team at any point in history in the history of the franchise, which team would you choose?
Well, let's go by eras. I think I can come up with three or four
Okay.
of my favorites. And this is before you guys were even, thought about terms of your lives. This would be 1967.
Wow.
Wilt Chamberlain, Luke Jackson, Chet Walker, Hal Greer, Wally Jones, Billy Cunningham off the bench. A dominant Sixers team. They were 68-13. They ended Boston's 8-year run as NBA champions and became champions themselves. I really did like the Barkley and Mahorn teams of the late 80s and
Hmm.
early 90s. They were a lot of fun, and the only problem was Michael Jordan was standing in the way, so there was no way they were going to get to the NBA Finals with Mike playing. Um, Not necessarily the 2001 team, but the first iteration of that team that showed the Sixers could be a playoff team. That was the 98-99 team. It was the lockout year. They played 50 games, and they beat Orlando. Orlando was a 3 seed. I want to say the Sixers were a 6 seed. And then, of course, that became the 2001 team, which was unbelievable. And then later in the process years, the Jimmy Butler team, the one that lost in the four bouncer to Kawhi Leonard.
Mm.
I
Oh,
always
that
think about the fact, yeah, yeah, I always think about if that shot had not gone in. I mean, you could do like a short documentary on
you
what if,
could. You
right?
could.
So, but because I have it on pretty good authority that the Raptors were gassed. that they were just
Yeah.
not going to survive overtime. And if the Sixers had won and gone on, maybe you do re-sign Jimmy Butler, and maybe the team
Mhm.
does look different. And
The world
who
looks different.
knows? Yeah, right. So those would
Right.
be the teams I think that really stand out in my mind.
It's so funny you say that about the what if thing because I personally hold the opinion that that may be the biggest or craziest or perhaps most one of the most maybe league altering what ifs in the history of the league because something like that leads to so many other things like you mentioned. The Sixers, or I'm sorry, that shot doesn't go in. Or maybe they call that travel on Kawhi. Who knows? Um, that doesn't happen. The Sixers win. They go to the Eastern Conference Finals. They could go to the finals. They could win the finals. Jimmy Butler resigns, even if they don't go to the finals. Jimmy Butler might resign because they made the Eastern Conference Finals. There's just it's a domino effect, and I really think it's one of the biggest questions that not even in Sixers history. I mean, in Sixers history, yes, but in league history, because what happens if that shot doesn't go in? Really, there's so much that could have ended up happening if that shot didn't go in.
And the what if thing is
Mhm.
just that it's always going to
Yeah,
be a total speculation.
of
You
course,
will never, yeah, you'll never know
of course.
what if or if it would have been better, but it's always fun to talk about. And in the case of that team, I think they really had the goods to make some
They
noise for a
did.
long time.
That was a good
Yeah,
team. That was
yeah,
a
they
Absolutely.
were good.
that was a
Yeah, they
good
were good.
team.
Yeah,
That was an impressive starting five we had back then. I remember,
yeah.
speaking of memories, I remember some of my favorite memories from that year and favorite calls, of yours were when Jimmy hit the couple game-winning step-back threes from the wing. One was against Charlotte, and one was against,
I
you'll
think that
correct
was a
me, I
two.
think
Was
one
that a
was
two or
against
a
Brooklyn.
three?
I think it was a
I don't
three.
remember, but I think you know what? I want to say three, but
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was a
I'm
three. One was against
69 years
Charlotte, and I
old,
think
so
one
I'm
was against
hopeless.
Brooklyn. They were both very similar.
Right.
They were.
Incredible, incredible
Hmm.
memories. And then we all
Hmm.
know what happened the rest of the way. Well, we don't have to do that again. But I think one of the questions I've really, even before this stupid podcast existed, even before, um, we even dreamed of, kind of having you on. One of the questions I've always kind of been curious or wanted to know in asking you, just in relation to your career and your signature calls. Turning garbage into gold, needing a three here. The shot clock's unplugged. Hold on, we're coming in for a landing. That one always got me
Yep.
up off the couch, up off my seat because I knew it was going to be a good finish. Kind of like anything that had to do with how those things like came and stuck in your career, or maybe there's one in particular you want to share about. I don't know. They're just really unique and
Like the
part of
origins
us,
of
part of being a Sixers fan. It just made it
yeah.
fun.
Yeah, thanks. You're very kind. I'll say this. I had a 13-year run as the halftime host, and in doing that, I did a lot of writing of features and game teases and things like that. And that comfort with the English language allowed me to do something that I think is incumbent for all good TV play-by-play guys, and that is to be able to say things in general that enhance what people can already see. And so, in the case of garbage into gold or coming in for a landing or any of that stuff, it was a way to encapsulate a moment with a metaphor that hopefully enhanced the experience for people. And
It did.
garbage into gold, I believe, was one of the first, if not the first. And so, when I got positive reactions, others kind of came to mind. None of the stuff was really ever premeditated. And two things about garbage into gold. One, I have it trademarked. So,
That's
Troy, be
awesome.
careful how you use it. Don't put it on a t-shirt. Otherwise, I'm going to have to come around and collect royalties. And the other thing is, I just remember it was a benign game during the regular season. I remember George Lynch getting an offensive rebound and putting it back, and just somewhere out of my brain came garbage into gold, and people seemed to like it. So, um,
It
yeah,
stuck.
you're very kind to say all that. Thank you.
Yeah, no, of course it truly has. It's made, being a Sixers fan fun and um, I mean, obviously your job is to call the games, but it's a added bonus if we get to have fun listening to you too. So,
Well, thanks.
All right, so Mark, we have one final question and then we're gonna let you go. I guess again, kind of similar to the whole Sixers team thing, but I really want to know if you could draft an all-time Sixers starting five, what would that look like? Any player from any year, anything you want. Starting five, anything you want.
regardless of position.
Regardless of, yes, absolutely, regardless of position.
Oh boy, that is like so
Whatever,
impossible.
whatever
You know
makes
what?
it easiest for you. If you want to do it by position, do it. If you don't want to do it by position, I'm totally okay with that too. Whatever makes it easiest for you.
Yeah, and the problem with all of this is I am, some people go, how can he not mention this guy? How can he not
Mhm.
mention this guy? But again, it's like it's the unanswerable
Yeah,
question.
it's just a personal
But
preference thing.
right, I understand. I understand.
Yeah.
So it's funny as I've gotten older. I mean, I idolized. I won't say idolize Wilt, but certainly Wilt Chamberlain, just given the sheer magnitude of his numbers and the way he dominated. But um, I'm not convinced that he would necessarily dominate today. So I kind of go back and forth because on the one hand, I think that's true, but on the other hand, you can't compare eras. So when you start to do an all-time team, you could say Wilt, and he would have been the man back in the day, but how would he do today? So um, I guess I put that asterisk on it as I do say. I would say Wilt Chamberlain. I'd say uh, Julius Erving.
Mhm.
I'd say Charles Barkley. Maybe that would be my front court.
Mhm.
And then I would have to put Allen Iverson. And I think to distribute the ball so so everybody understood that, you know, not everybody can have the ball all the time. I'd have Maurice Cheeks out there.
Oh wow. Okay.
Nice.
Okay. I really like how you mentioned the point about um whether or not Wilt would do what he did in this era because and you bring up a good point. It's just difficult to have a conversation like that. And like you mentioned earlier, the game is just so different now. Even what you said earlier with the team around Iverson, I agree with you. I don't think that would be able to happen today. I just think the game is so different, especially again, like you said, with the threes. The game is just so different nowadays. I don't really think you could put a team like that around a guy like Iverson and have the success that the Sixers did. Um, but yeah, to the Wilt thing, it's always an interesting conversation because when you do talk about all-time lineups, all-time teams, it's tough to figure out, okay, if we put Wilt in today's era, what's going to happen? We don't know. We can't know. It's impossible. So it's I really like how you preface with that because it's hard to compare eras. It's hard to say, okay, this guy in this era, what would he do? Like a big conversation nowadays is, oh, if you put LeBron in the 80s, what's going to happen? If you put Michael Jordan in today's era, what's going to happen? We can guess. It can be a fun conversation at times, but it's tough to figure that out because we just can't know. It's quite literally impossible to figure that
Although,
out.
you know what? I just thought while you were giving that explanation about all the three-point shooting, I'm thinking, okay, you put Wilt on a team today, look at all the room he would have.
Yeah, that's maybe
You
he
know what
would
I mean?
shoot
So,
threes.
so
Maybe he would
maybe,
shoot threes.
yeah. So, well,
Well,
right,
maybe not, but
right.
but
I mean, then it was just like so totally unheard of.
yep.
But that's why that kind of stuff is fun, and it's best left for the man caves and the bars to sit there and talk about
Yes.
because the answer is there is no answer, and that's what makes it so much fun. You have your opinion and you argue with people, and that's one of the many things that's great about sports.
Absolutely.
No
Absolutely.
doubt. No doubt. Well, again, Mr. Zumoff, thank you so, so, so much. It's been a privilege to have you come and join us, hang out with us for a little bit. This is Planet 76, episode 166. And it's, again, a fun one with a special guest. Thanks for coming on and hanging out with us.
My pleasure, guys.
Thank you.
You just listened to an episode of the Planet 76 podcast. Hey, we appreciate you joining us for this episode. Whatever platform you're on, why don't you hit that subscribe button for us, and we'll see you next time.